Good afternoon to everybody present here and welcome to Connect Karo 2023 and to our session Connect Karo for RECOURSE, which is Resilient Community Opportunities and Urban Services. So this is a roundtable session and we have 10 panelists who would be brainstorming during the session on ways in which we can collectively build the community's resilience, and as a community of practice, what are the ways in which we are already doing and how can we scale it up. So without much ado, I'll actually jump into the context setting for this session by taking you through one of our projects, which is called the IWASI CDP, which is IWASI CDP, which stands for Australia-India Water Security Initiative Community Demonstration Project. And I shall be sharing the evidences that we have gathered from our work and engagement in the CDP, in this project. So this initiative, I must tell you all, is a consortium. It's a project in which there's a consortium of partners. And we are very grateful that some of our partners are present right here in this room with us. So we have 4 partners in this. This is funded by Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, the Australian government. And the 4 partners here are Mahila Housing Seva Trust, McGregor Coxall, who is our Australian partner and the technical lead. Then we have National Institute of Urban Affairs, and we have WRI-India, who as a project lead for this. So we have, just now we've been joined by Muazzam Malik, who is our Managing Director of Global Delivery of WRI, or World Resources Institute. We have Mr. V.K. Madhavan, who is the CEO of WRI-India. We have Ms. Ritu Kataria, who is the co-founder of Core Urban Foundation. We have Rahul Sachdeva, who is the Senior Program Specialist of Water and Environment at National Institute of Urban Affairs. We have Ms. Bijal Brahmbhatt, the Director of Mahila Housing Seva Trust and one of our partners, along with Rahul, in the IWASI CDP project. And shortly, we have Ms. Akhila Shivdas here, who's the Executive Director of Center for Advocacy and Research. And we've been joined by Swati Janu, the founder of Social Design Collaborative. And we'll be shortly joined by Dipinder Singh Kapoor, who is the Director of CSE, the Water Program, Mr. Manoj Gulati from Water.org, and Mr. Vinay Harshwal from Water for People. So I'm sure they'll be joining us anytime now. So just taking you through the project IWASI and setting the context of how we have done resilient. We, along with our partners, have done the resilient community opportunities and urban services, how we're looking at it in our project. So IWASI, actually the vision of this project is to welcome Mr. Manoj, is to help transition two disadvantaged communities in Delhi along the continuum towards a water-sensitive community by 2025. The 2 communities that we have, which we call our community demonstration project sites, are located in west of Delhi, and namely they are very different in typologies. One is an urban village called Mubarakpur Dabas, and the other is a resettlement colony, which is called Bakarwala Resettlement Colony. Both of these communities have a lot of water and associated challenges. Some of them are, it's like flooding, issues of groundwater quality, water body pollution, livability challenges, issues of accessing good quality water, sanitation, and even stormwater management. So how our project went around building community resilience through IWASI, and the implementation modalities for that was, this was to conduct a community resilience assessments, the formation of community-based organizations, and in both communities this was slightly different because in one, the engagement of one of our partners, MHD, was long there, and it was building incrementally on that relationship that was there in the community. Then identification of leaders amongst the community who would come together to form a community action group, and who would be empowered and trained who will be further empowered and trained to collectively and who are committed to work towards the collective needs of the community. And then in a participatory manner, design and prioritize some of the solutions to the challenges that we had listed with the help of these community action groups. And then use citizen science to actually monitor the performance of the solutions when implemented. And finally, incorporating these sort of the community action groups into a formal or in a way institutionalizing them through urban water decision making systems. This is how we have looked at it. So just dwelling a little bit more on some of those the modalities. So for example, when it comes to assessments, we had an array of assessments from baseline household surveys to participatory mapathons, which was spatially mapping the challenges, disaggregated level vulnerability assessments, all of which were feeding into the co-creation of a community-based resilience action plan. And some of these images are showing that. So this is a snippet of the community-based vulnerability assessment toolkit, and special attention was paid to the aspects of gender, disability, gender equality, disability, and social inclusion. So after the assessments and understanding where the shortcomings are or where the community stands, we moved on to building the capacity of that the community members. So in order to understand, to build a better robust understanding of the community about the risk, the uncertainties, and the solutions that could be incorporated and implemented. So this was done through sensitization meetings, demystifying some of the technical concepts like climate change and the impacts of climate change, using a variety of methods like video screening, games. Over 170 engagements were conducted in a period of 12 months, which reached out to the 3,600 plus community members in the two communities of Bakarwala and Mubarakpur Dhabas. So moving on to the leadership skill development. So, there was a collective understanding that to empower them and to make them as change makers, they need to understand how they can be skilled with the leadership, the skills that you require to negotiate the existing systems. So for that, they were trained to understand how to do some of these apps like the MCD 311 app. There was a training given to understand how to use that app, how to file a complaint, how to use get evidence to then take that to the required agencies to actually have a conversation of how to together to find a solution together on some of those challenges that they were facing. And then another thing that we were doing is also because all of this process of community resilient building takes a significant amount of time. So then we also looked at trust building mechanisms while this entire process was happening. So, for example, this was an event that we did, which was focused on restoring a park for a Children's Day Carnival, which was actually using the community and the community volunteers to help restore a park and set up pop-up play elements for the children. And it was done last year as a carnival, which actually taught using children as change makers, educate them about the water cycle, sensitize them, build trust in the larger community, which saw almost 150 plus children participating in this, and this was done in one of our community. So it's actually just socializing through events and creating that social cohesion and that sense of community. And then we see that a key aspect of IYC CDP is also to create a platform of collaborative governance at a community level and also at the city level. So which is looked at as the two tiers of collaborative governance. So you have the Community Water Forum and the Delhi Water Forum. And in both of these communities, we had the two forums that were set up, which actually is a platform for the community and the local government agencies and some of the local representatives to connect on the problem solution thought process in a very hybrid manner, which was looking at it top down but also bottom up. So it was a space that was created. So both Bakarwala and Mubarakpur has community water forums that have been set up. And then there's also how these forums can then talk at the Delhi Water Forum at a city level. And as I previously mentioned, actually through our project, we have a very we are looking at the aspects of GEPSI, which is gender equality, disability and social inclusion, in a very critical manner. And it has been incorporated through the entire project framework and the life cycle in various manners. And these are some of the images of, working with children, having special, and making sure that, elderly participate and have a representation and also active participation in the meetings. Women and men, and of course, also looking and taking into special account people with disabilities to be part of our engagements. And some of the success stories, and not taking too much time, is that in the 15 months of our engagement across these communities, we've seen how some of the household level service connections, especially with water supply, sewer, stormwater management, have actually been formalized or restored. In most of the households, there's now been in one of our communities, they are filing for water supply and metered water connections. Like this image is showing, you can see that community participation and the CAGs, that they have actually been empowered to take up some of these matters like the solid waste management, which was a critical issue, with the local agencies and have that solved. Like this was a key hotspot of solid waste which has been removed because of them understanding the interconnected issues that such hotspots create. And of course, we are actively working towards institutionalizing the water forums and having that hybrid mode of talking about co-creating and co-designing water-sensitive solutions for the communities. So with that, I would like to conclude on the IWASI and our work. So I would actually now request Mr. Muazzam Malik. Muazzam is our Managing Director of Global Delivery, WRI, to actually come up and to just probably from this, Muazzam, if you could just give the opening remarks for the session.
WRI's managing director for global delivery. I'm based in London. I've been with WRI for just 9 months or so. Prior to that, I was a UK civil servant and diplomat. But very nice to be here in India for Connect Karo, and very nice to be here in this session. So as you will all know better even than I do, the urban services divide in global south cities is growing exponentially with rapid and unplanned urbanization. On one side of that divide are city dwellers who have access to crucial urban services and infrastructure. And on the other side, of course, are those who lack running water, sanitation, electricity, decent housing, transport, and other amenities. So today, more than 1.2 billion people live in urban slums and are among the underserved, representing around a third of urban dwellers worldwide and 2/3 of those in low-income countries. So those who are underserved by urban services suffer disproportionately, not only from disease outbreaks, but also from threats of all kinds, including economic shocks, environmental degradation, and natural disasters. That urban services divide has the potential to lock cities into a cycle of poverty, low productivity, and unhealthy living conditions for the rest of the century and beyond, and in so doing undermining everyone's quality of life. So global efforts to fight poverty hinge on whether urban populations have access to services and opportunities. And of course, environmental degradation and climate change are also closely linked to urban problems. So we need a new approach for transformative change in cities. The time is short-lived. The time for piecemeal solutions is over. And many policymakers, business leaders, and concerned citizens know that unequal cities cannot continue on the current path. And indeed, many policymakers, business leaders, and citizens are already embarking on a transition to a better future. So at WRI, we've been thinking about this in terms of 7 transformations that can help achieve a more equal, prosperous, and sustainable city. First, infrastructure design and delivery, prioritizing the vulnerable. Second, service provision models, partnering with alternative service providers. Taken together, those 2 things can help us reimagine service provision. Third, data collection practices, improving local data through community engagement. Fourth, informal urban employment, recognizing and supporting informal workers. And together, those 2 transformations can help us to include the excluded. Fifth, financing and subsidies, increasing investment and targeting funds innovatively. Sixth, urban land management, promoting transparency and integrated spatial planning. Seventh, governance and institutions, creating diverse coalitions. And taken together, those 3 transformations can help us to enable change. So these 7 transformations that WRI and other partners are focused on are broad and adaptable to different local contexts. They need to be, because all cities are not the same and the challenges are not the same. They're not mutually exclusive, but each transformation represents a significant shift in mindsets and practices. Whatever the starting point for cities, these transformations provide pathways to improve the quality of life for all urban residents. Of course, communities are on the front lines of climate change impacts, yet they rarely have a voice in decisions over how to protect themselves from those impacts. So there's a growing movement for locally led adaptation, a paradigm where local communities lead decisions over how, when, and where to adapt. This recognizes the value of local knowledge and expertise to address climate risks and ensures that local actors have equitable access to power and resources to build resilience. In thinking about locally led adaptation, I think there are a number of key principles that we are focused on at WRI. Devolving decision-making to the lowest appropriate level, addressing inequalities faced by women and other excluded groups, providing patient and predictable funding, investing in local capabilities which leave an institutional legacy, building a robust understanding of climate risk and uncertainty, flexible programming and learning, and ensuring transparency and accountability. Taken together, we believe that a locally led adaptation has the potential to unlock progress towards those 7 transformations. So I look forward to the roundtable, and I look forward to hearing the voices of our colleagues and partners, and indeed perspectives on how to take forward this incredibly important challenge for our times.
Thank you, Mazam, for those remarks. I will now pass over to Samrat to just moderate the roundtable.
Thank you, Ashwati. Thank you, Mozam. It was great to hear you on this critical topic. So before the actual deliberation, first of all, I would like to thank everyone over here for taking out the time and be part of this deliberation. Thank you for coming over here. So before we start, I just would like to share a quick experience from my past, and which I would like to discuss quite a lot, is that when I was part of an environmental consulting firm, and what we would like to say at that point of time, if we shut down or close an industry because of the pollution, that's just a part or solution of a problem. But until and unless we change the back end regulation, if we don't do that, next new factory or industry will be there, and that will again continue pollution. So there is a sort of looking at some systemic change that need to happen through which we can actually scale or replicate certain impact or certain change. As we are doing this project, one of the key topic that we are continuously discussing amongst ourselves, that while we are putting lots of investment in one specific community, 2 specific communities, or maybe collectively in this room, maybe 50 specific communities, but it's not the India. India has thousands and lakhs of such communities. Then how we can actually scale and replicate? Is it possible that this scaling and replication always needs NGOs to take a lead? Can community by themselves replicate things? And that's what we want to discuss today. Because we have a very short time here today for discussion or deliberation, we sort of divided in 3 tracks of discussion. The first track is looking at some of the possibilities of replication, how we can scale, and what are some of the models that some of us here already looked at, and looking at the feasibility or implementability of such model. So with that, for track 1, I would like to go to Mr. Madhavan, Mr. Gulati, and Vinay. Mr. Madhavan, if we can start from you.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm not sure if I'm necessarily the best speaker to kick this off, for the simple reason that Actually, when I looked at the question posed for your track, my immediate response was why. And the answer is also to your question of is it possible for communities to do this on their own? I'm not so sure. I'm not even sure it's possible in the short run. And I'll try and explain why. I think in the Indian context, we need to recognize that we're constrained by certain factors. One is that the reality of those who live in notified slums and those who live in non-notified slums are very different. Some cities have recognized that even residents of non-notified slums are entitled to basic services, but there are many parts of the country, many states, including large cities, where this is not the norm. So even in a city like Bengaluru, for example, if you happen to have the misfortune of living in a non-notified slum, even if you have lived there for 30 years or 40 years, that is no guarantor of access to basic services from the state. So the state assumes zero responsibility for those residents of non-notified slums. What it does in terms of then provision of basic services in such locations is that by design you need to look at solutions that can actually be theoretically moved at low cost. You can't even look at substantive investments in infrastructure because security of tenure of that location itself is uncertain, right? So it poses challenges then in terms of provision of services. I think the second is to recognize that within our cities also there are specific, for example, occupational groups that will tend to be much more vulnerable than others, right? And these can vary depending on the city. So, for example, if you have migrants from another state, you have migrants belonging to minority communities, they're likely to be more vulnerable. You will also have specific occupational groups, sanitation workers, waste pickers, families of those that reside in cities, which tend to be much more vulnerable, therefore posing challenges in terms of access to basic services. What we're finding is that by and large, if you're looking at people residing in low-income settlements in urban areas, we're still at the stage where we're talking about basic access to services. So if you look at the Sustainable Development Goals and the ladder of services, we're a far cry from worrying about safely managed service provision. We're still dealing with basic access to basic services from the SDG perspective. Where the state fails, we are finding evidence that the market has stepped in, right? And therefore, in some sense, state failure has led to opportunities for private service providers markets. So I've been to settlements where, for example, waste pickers reside, where provision of water for domestic purposes is provided by a contractor who they're indebted to, and they buy all their drinking water from a packaged water service provider in their settlement. So they're buying packaged water, and their contractor who engages them, who's provided them with labor, is responsible for water for domestic, which is brought in through tankers and made available to them. So in some sense, you're finding that the service provision is now being delivered by other service providers. What's very clear is low-income families tend to pay a very significant price to access these services. So the problem is not willingness to pay, the problem is willingness to charge as far as the state is concerned. Now, the absence of, WRI's own study, which it did a few years ago of looking at water provision and those who are beyond the pipe, very clearly revealed that in cities where you don't have access to pipe water services provided by the municipality, the cost incurred to access basic services could be 12 to 26% or whatever it is, even if you would look at Mumbai and Bangalore. So the fact is that you're also talking about a certain quintile of the population who, as a total proportion of their income, are paying a disproportionate amount on accessing basic services. So from an equity perspective, we have a huge problem here. Where are the opportunities? The opportunities are in recognizing that there is a demand, and the fact that even residents in these areas, depending on whether it's a homogeneous settlement or has a heterogeneous problem, the nature of organization becomes even harder. So in some sense, you also need to recognize that their linkage, urban governance tends to be very poor. And in these areas, you will find that by and large it has failed. Now you're starting to see opportunities through urban rural livelihood missions where you're finding self-help groups emerging in some of these settlements. And that's where the opportunity is, because in the absence of a very good governance mechanism, the fact that you have a collective of women at the habitation level is now creating at least a platform for women to organize themselves. Ostensibly, they were created for livelihoods, but that same platform now is increasingly starting to find reflection, where these platforms are playing a role in ensuring that those communities get access to basic services. There are two gaps, which is that we still, when we talk urban, we tend to talk large metropolitan cities. Small towns in this country are by and large ignored, right? It is, if you were to compare efforts made in cities like Delhi with even Ranchi or Bhubaneswar, you will find that there's a world of difference. If you go beyond that and you start to look at maybe, Bhagalpur or Buxar or Damoh in Madhya Pradesh, you will just find a complete lack of effort in smaller towns. And I think that's an opportunity waiting for institutions and the state to potentially work in, where you could potentially prevent the problem before it gets out of hand. In larger cities, you're trying to look at retrofitting because you have a constraint of space. In smaller towns where the problem's not got out of hand, we have the possibility of getting in earlier, but there's very little effort that we're seeing in those areas. I'd likely also mention two other issues that compound the problem in urban areas for low-income settlements, which is that the multiplicity of service providers makes navigation of this to access services very complex. And the opportunity cost for residents of these areas to go out and seek services for collective action tend to be very low. So I would say that there are opportunities, there is demand, but till such a time that the state steps up, I think there is a role for all institutions to play in collectivization to generate demand for services. Once we start to see evidence of happening in a large enough area in this country, it might spread on its own. But I don't think we've either reached the critical mass in terms of investment or are close to getting to a tipping point where it will spread on its own. Thank you.
I would like to take your attention that one of the site is actually a resettlement colony, and the other site is a sort of a mix of urban village plus informal settlement. So I won't say that they fall under the non-notified slums, but even after that, we see that even if they have a DJB connection, but they may get half an hour every second day of water, or they have to take provisions of the alternative service provider, and it always tells that it is expensive to be poor. So I mean, I'm still thinking that are there any solutions or opportunities, just in case if you have any one or two line of answer. But I'll with that I would like to come to Mr. Gulati, but yeah, something, if you have anything specific you would like to share.
The challenge in the framing is that can this happen on its own without external help?
Yeah.
If you were to look at the two examples that you presented as well, and that in fact is all our experience at this table, that we've all played the role of the facilitator or the catalyst. Right? We're not service providers, but we have in some sense helped in organizing communities around collective action, have generated demand, and they've found solutions on their own. But you need that trigger, you need that investment, right?
Right.
The challenge today is this going to happen on its own without any external agency? There might be examples of it, but you will need information, you will need examples of this where people can hear from other communities and possibly take this on their own. Today, my sense is it isn't happening on a large enough scale for even that word of that success to spread on its own.
Right. Thank you. Manoj, coming to you, I mean, of course, I have read the book published by Water.org on microfinance and the entire story of Water.org's journey. Probably you can put some light on how microfinance sort of helped the entire movement, and can it have the potential of taking by its own the entire transformative journey of community resilience?
Sure. Thank you, Samrat. And when I similar to what Madhavan you had in mind, am I the speaker? Okay. So I had the same thing. How do you take community resilience, and then there's a punchline below that, and take it, with your own to ensure the opportunities are achieved. And to me, that was, while Madhavan very well said that the communities cannot be slums the way they have been established, make it difficult to have it. I wanted to start exploring as to, are there examples and are there ways by which communities on their own can actually explore solutions. At the same time, Mr. Malik's comment about today's urban communities becoming integrated so much that one cannot solve one without the other is actually very powerful, because I myself, I mean, if I come out of my building society and I take two left turns and I'm in a slum area, that slum area is actually supporting the a little more affluent urban community. And so there's interdependency between each other existing, and this is common across the city. I then started to think about what have been the real issues that we build upon. And I find that one of the biggest issues that we have to talk about is about the behavioral change that is required. And I really enjoyed the presentation of Ivasa that was there, because it talks about how you have to can bring about the change. But in order to bring the change, you've got to really start assessing is that what are the gaps in the system that we have. We are currently doing a project, and we are doing it with Seva Bank, one of the first all-women bank. So it's a very powerful force in Gujarat. And over there, we are talking about how to bring about urban changes in 2 ULBs that is there in certain district DMAs, that are district metered areas. What we are finding is that the poor have there, and like Madhavan talked about, getting water, packet waters, and or getting it through tankers is actually a cost that they're paying. So we started to work with them in terms of saying, what do you really need, in order to break that? The pipe water which is coming through is coming for 1.5 hours a day, sometimes 1 hour a day. This is during the good season, that rainy season. By the time it gets post October, it's going to trickle down to, and by early March, it's going to be trickling down to 30 to 40 minutes, which means that they don't have solutions for themselves. And when it comes in that 40 minutes, they have to solve their problems. And this is for those which are approved slums, right? So even in those areas, they're having challenges. These are for houses, low-income houses, LIGs, where we are having their problems. How do you break that myth? Is by making sure that you have storage tanks for them. Storage tanks, making sure that those storage tanks can collect adequate amount of water, especially in the peri-urban, the towns that are still not the metro urbans, but we're talking about the tier 2, tier 3 towns. There, these solutions really solve the issue. We also found that the storage tanks actually gives them the confidence of not having to run to be focused on that every time. The storage tanks actually, when you connect it with solar pumps, are actually not taking away, becoming an expense for them. And so they're very happy to it, given that most of the state governments have now started to give subsidies for solar pumps or solar connections, or solar power. So then they get connected, the pumps get connected to it. We found another demand that is now coming very openly for us when we are going through our banks and MFIs, is that the need in the urban areas for roof rainwater harvesting. I would have thought this is going to be something which is going to happen like it's an evolving demand, but the more you put behavioral change, the more you bring them to understand it, we are finding that people are willing to invest in having their own roof rainwater harvesting systems. Which means effectively when they're not having predictability of the water, that it will come to them, they will actually have solutions that are available for them, which gives them security that they can have access to it. The key issue again always circles back, in my experiences, circling back to behavioral change, bringing that awareness that you have a solution, you can afford a solution. Again, Mr. Malik talked about the idea that one of the transformation areas is finance. How do you link it to them in making sure that this happens? How do you make sure that the individual understands that by investing in these solutions, taking ownership of this roof rainwater harvesting or a storage tank, I'm actually solving my own problem? versus having to depend on the 40 minutes of water that will come and then think of alternative outside. So give them the longer perspective and help them solve that. I want to switch very quickly into the area of also when we talk about the coexistence that happens. And one of the things that in community resilience is, and generally in community resilience, it's not just about the weaker section, it's also about the the MSME, the small kherati, the store that is there, the plumber shop that is there, because the entire economy shuts down when the climate resilience happens, when climate situations happen. For adaptation, we've got to start thinking about ways to actually make those small micro shops the ability to bounce back at the fastest, to take care of their costs. I was fortunate a few years back, I was able to spend some time in the West, and we had climate insurance. Climate insurance allowed the house or the SME to actually be able to have that confidence that if something happens, I can bounce back. In India, we don't have a decent climate insurance. I think that's a very big tool that you can actually work with people to say, if your house gets flooded, and if we get a cluster, an insurance company will not come into this market. We have to create the insurance company to come into this market by giving them that these people, we have 4,000 families in these 4 slums who are willing to take this insurance. Are you willing to come in with it? This is again when we are having the opportunities that are there in the notified areas. So we've got to really start somewhere, and then take the notified slums, take the LIGs, and solve that problem for them, because the noise, the awareness then spreads across the entire system. I think that's my best hope, that along with the reality that Madhavan presents, we also have a view of hope that we start breaking the code from some place in the system. One last comment. One of the good other examples which I found, which was the project Vasant, the Vasant Vihar Udyan one, where if I don't know if many of you have heard about it, but it's a very powerful project where there was a slum with the Vasant Vihar, the slum area, and the wastewater treatment plant for Vasant Kunj had actually gone defunct, and they solved the problem by actually making the sewage water and reactivating the treatment plant. The park, which was all antisocial elements were over there, they got it cleaned up, and they actually were able to convert that whole area into a solution that I think coexists between the very affluent Vasant Vihar community and the slums of Vasant Vihar. I think that example again was another case where people took their own ownership and solved their own problem, not with as much dependency on the government as on their own commitment. The Vasant Vihar, most of the housing communities stepped up and they started to take care of it because the antisocial elements were affecting their houses. That's what we need to start thinking about from a coexistence point of view. Back to you, Samrat, with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Manoj. I think Vinay Herschel is not here today, but I would like to go to Bijalven. Sorry, it's in track one. I'm coming back. I'm coming to you. You have worked this monsoon action plan, heat action plan, and all those things. Do you have any sort of hope that such plan can be sort of made in a way that it can be scalable or replicable by communities across India by themselves? I mean, do you think that is a possibility?
By themselves, I think it's a very long. It could be possible, but it's a very long term, approach. So in the short term, I don't think it's going to be possible. Two things, because this. As Madhavanji said, these processes are very complex and several stakeholders are involved, and therefore communities have to be able to talk to them meaningfully and get them on the same table. I think that's a very big investment, and that communities are then taken seriously. So we have been working for years and years with communities, and I see almost 7 to 10 years of engagement very closely with them on various issues, including of course climate change now, that they are able to come to a certain level and start demanding and start working on their own. And again, you have to understand that I think the big challenge also, if you as Madhavanji said, if I talk of water, say it's more about access. Still, it's about access. So if you are focused on access on a day-to-day basis, how do you talk of the larger things like, which involve the entire city or the ward, or about sensitive designs, or that's the biggest challenge. And these are all processes which are very democratic. You need to keep the group cohesive, you need to keep it functioning, you need to see that it takes lead, and also while it works in a very short term at the household and settlement level, how can it start working at a city level? And we've done all, but I would say almost 10 years of very deep engagement on such issues shows some response, at least at a city level and at a planning level from the communities. But that's tough.
Point noted, Vijayaraman. Yeah. I would like to go now to the track 2 question, which is basically talking about the policy and the funding convergence that currently exist, or we may need to think from a near future standpoint. And with this question, I would like to go to Akila ma'am. And I mean, you have decades of experience dealing, working with the community and building this resilience. Maybe you can start from the previous track, but also if you can share with us about your thought around some of the policy level convergence or the funding level convergence, or if there are new ways of funding can be brought in for building this community resilience.
To build on the first case. Yeah, I mean, what everything that's been said is, there's nothing incorrect. It all depends on where you are positioned and where have your efforts been. And if you look back, SEWA has been from the 80s talking about the urban poor and their rights and entitlement. Then you had in Bombay, you had a whole pavement dwellers, movement that went right up to the court, housing rights for the poor. And in Delhi, in fact, the late 80s, we had a huge cholera outbreak. Very sort of, and that time you had, women's groups like Action India taking the lead in answering some very fundamental questions about the rights of the poor. But I think it was in the mid-2000s when we really got the challenge to, confront the challenge. And that's when you had these Human Development Index reports. And they clearly told you that the disparity is unacceptable. And the way cities are being molded, we're going to become a sort of like a concentration camp for the poor. There's going to be such disparity if we don't do some course correction. I think that's when the real thinking began. And it's not surprising. It's not that it happened all overnight and suddenly there was a realization. I think this was the time when urban local bodies were actually collapsing under their weight. They just could not deal with the growing cities. And the people are very smart. They're actually organically resilient. It's not like they have to be taught resilience by either the NGO or the CBO or the government. I think we all need to learn from them, quite frankly. And they realized very early, by mid-2006, 2007, that, they need to speak up. They need to sort of band together. Even if this government has the best intentions and the best CSOs coming together, the best experts coming together, there's just too many barriers. And no one knows that better than the poor. There are institutional, there are governance, there are cultural, there are structural, they know it. They sense it. And when we went into the slums in 2007, 2008, we saw a different mood in the people. It was not about just, sort of raising their voice. In fact, they've been raising their voice for many years. They even decided that they're not going to raise their voice once in 5 years. They're going to raise it every day. They're going to become part of the solution. This realization came in the late 2008 to 10. And that is what we have been building on. And from 2014, there have been huge opportunities for the urban poor, irrespective of the cities they are in, Madhuri. Please don't underestimate people. They are networking with, power structures every day. They're not like us, sitting in our cocoons, going out when we want to, seeing one occasional model here and there. You go to any politician's house on a Sunday, on a day of Darbar, and you'll see them thronging because they know that, that they need to connect with people. And they have this very unique habit. Wherever they go, they collect visiting cards. If you go to any of their homes, they have a proper collection of visiting cards. If they meet you, they take your card from you. Because that's how they connect with people. And they don't have to be taught. They don't have to go to schools and colleges and sit with NGOs. They know. It's just school of life. And this is where we, decided. Two things we decided, and that's where our model is based on. Please take what is upstream, and ensure that the upstream, to strengthen the upstream, works with the downstream. They don't even have to be altruistic. They don't have to worry about the poor. They just have to worry about themselves. They have to worry about their own targets, their own, whatever they are expected to do. And we found that from 2014 onwards, right from the Swachh Bharat phase 1, we have been able to scale up across the cities a lot of very sort of strong community solutions on each of these issues. They're not what they were before, they're not the same today. They have ensured wherever they've gone, they have ensured that, all policy and program not just trickles down to them, but gets shaped with their, collaboration and discussion. And I think that's where the solution lies. The solution doesn't lie in building something at the community level, then building something at the system level, and then arranging a marriage. No, I don't think we need to broker anything. I think we will need to create leadership that is agile, that's able to understand the opportunity. Today, both in Bhubaneswar and Jaipur, we have very strong community operating systems, platforms. They work at the ward level with the entire ward governance system. They work at the slum level with the most deprived, communities and households. And everything is properly, calibrated and navigated. If you have to get a cesspool vehicle into a slum, it's not easy. The vehicles cannot even traverse that, lane and road. The pipes don't fit or are not long enough to go to their homes. They have arranged for 1,000 cc cesspool vehicles. They have arranged, they sit in the corporation and they actually coordinate the trucks. They ensure that the vehicles also break into their profit. They need to make 1,000 a trip. They do back-to-back 3 houses, get 3 houses desludged. The operator makes 1,000, the consumer gets 300 for the service, and they all go home happy. They ensure that when the truck comes, even the lanes are cleared, animals are crawling, little babies are running. They make sure of all of that. None of that is even conceived by us sitting here. We just assume that there's one big system that orchestrates everything. They don't orchestrate nothing. It's all on paper. Believe me, everything is on paper. The best of the sentiments and the best of intentionalities are there on paper. Who gets it, make it happening? It's them who make it happen. They started with 600 households. They've closed now, climbed up to 10,000 households, getting periodically desludged on their terms, along with the other sanitary workers, seeing to it that the entire thing goes to the plant for treatment, doesn't get tipped here and there. They're taking as much responsibility for the regulation. No middle class citizen will ever bother to do that. We probably see it as a waste of his time, his precious time. They'd rather just look after themselves, and they actually take and everybody turns around and says, why should they do all this? Why are they doing all this? They're very clear that that they need to have as much say in the system. They need to be sort of a dynamic actor in the system, an enabler and a mover in the system. They're very clear to do all that. And that's where the opportunity lies. They're also skilled, unlike the middle class. We have a BA, MA degree. What do we do with that degree? They are masons, they are plumbers, they are builders. They are such a rich resource in the community. And the minute you bring them together, give them a sense of purpose, and we have ensured that they suspend all judgment. They learn about the system. The point is not the disparity. The point is not even that he's rich and you're poor. The point is that you have not had the opportunity to get the idiom, and he unfortunately doesn't have the opportunity to learn things. He only knows the idiom, unfortunately. Doesn't know the real thing. And here you know the real thing, but you don't have the idiom, and therefore you're not heard. So you have to capture the two together, ensure that their idiom comes in and their real thing comes in here, and the whole system unlocks. And the last point I want to make clear here is our experience has shown that people on the top really make very little difference. Yes, they can push things to begin with, but what really have the system, the actual, shall we say, the anchor of the system is the middle. You strengthen the middle. You make the middle the ally of the poor. You can get both of them, moving in a sort of effective speed. And today, last point, today they've developed what is called a dashboard in every ward, which captures from the ward details are given by the municipal corporation. That is details of the apartments and the high-rise buildings. For the slums, they capture all the details on water, on sanitation, on waste, on disabled households, on transgender households. Every month that data is reviewed. It's like a dashboard. It's like a partly for their own introspection. कि क्यों नहीं हो रहा है? वहाँ पर क्यों नहीं निकाल रहे हैं? यहाँ पर क्यों नहीं साफ कर रहे हैं? हमारा हक नहीं बनता है ये सेवा मिलने के लिए. All of those answers are, then brought to the review meeting every month. And along with that, they've also started they started using a mobile radio, a mobile app radio. They're putting out messages across the city where they're not indirectly in touch with people. And especially people who are, sort of holed in their homes, they cannot go out, they can't be part of any group meetings, community meetings. They are being linked through the mobile, the plain mobile, not Android. It's a cloud-based app which anybody can message and, So by 9 to 11, all their grievances come in through the mobile, and that grievance is linked to the municipal portal. From 11 to 4, the answers start coming in as to whether they can solve the problem or not. Everything is there in the system today. All you need is, this kind of, shall we say, customizing it to also accommodate what is called a community system.
Just probably a little continuation of what you have mentioned. I mean, you have mentioned the community-led efforts, right? Have you ever faced a challenge that the sustenance of that community-led effort gets truncated because there are no sort of a community-owned, community-operated models or any such things? I mean, how it can sustain over a decade or
we've never had that problem because we very early on link up the community with, there are natural owners. We are not. The NGO, pardon me, Madhavan, is not any owner of any kind. It's not even a good enough catalyst. It can at best, throw up some ideas here and there. The natural owners are the government. They have to provide the service, and the community that has to, set the reality right. These are the two natural owners. And mind you, they're very, very infectious. They're very contagious as people. You get to know them, the Stockholm syndrome sets in. and the system actually can't do anything without them. They'll dial their number. Say, आप आइए, आपके साथ ही हम कर सकते हैं, आपके बिना नहीं हो सकता है. So, there is a natural, coming together, and there's no dependence on us at all. All we do is to ensure that they get the right sort of, connect, and that they're able to see every side of the picture, and then they exercise their own judgment. There was one place in Tigri where we had a very, very unpleasant incident because the women changed the direction of the pump or whatever, the tube or whatever, and then that little mafia in that, threatened them. For 1.5 years, the women were under tremendous threat. The children had to be pulled out of school. It was that bad. They were threatening to put acid on them, all of that. They battled that, and we went back 10 years later, and they have completely changed the settlement. They said, "Aapka zarurat hi nahi tha. Aapne jo bhi bataya, humne seekh liya." And that struggle really taught us कि अगले बार ना करना है तो इनको साथ में लेके जाओ, इनके साथ करके कुछ build proper alliances. We had not done that. We have learned that too. So never underestimate people. I think we need a little more learning and coaching. I don't think it's the people.
Rahul, that puts you in a tight spot now.
I'm just thinking what you're going to ask me and what I'm going to ask.
Yeah, no, Rahul, I mean, of course, being in NIUA, I mean, you have some understanding how ministry is actually focusing on. I mean, of course, there are smart cities, there are Amrut 2.0 and all those programs, but how this entire disadvantaged community narrative is built into such programs, or if there are any convergence or policy level convergence, funding level convergence towards that.
I would say that, we know about all this national level kind of schemes, which kind of, kind of lay a broad outline in terms of when we talk about services provision. So, for example, we have SPM, which talks about now garbage-free cities. It's Amrut, which talks about water-secure cities. Then we have Jal Jeevan Mission, which talks about providing water to every household. So they give a broad outline, but I guess it's now up to the states that how they take this narrative forward. Because water is a state subject, and it's their responsibility to kind of provide water. So I would take the example of again Odisha state, very progressive, in continuation to what Akila ji said, and also maybe share some kind of experience of NIU around, because 2 years back we were kind of engaged with the Odisha state government in assessing the impact of 24/7 the drink from tap scheme now that they have done, probably first in the country to provide a 24/7 drinking water quality at tap level in slum household. We have seen many cities kind of trying to do that on a pilot basis, and it has remained at a pilot base. They have not gained that success, but probably Odisha is the first state in the country wherein they have implemented this in few pockets of Bhubaneswar, in which one slum pocket is this Salia Sahi, which is one of the biggest slum, 50,000-60,000 population slum, and for an entire city of Puri, again having slum pockets, having some population around 60-65,000. So one side what I was hearing that if we talk about slums, it's not about the the quality or the degree, it is about the even providing basic access. But here's an example where the state has completely turned around and worked with the community and provided a 24/7. Can you imagine I having a household in a slum and I get 24/7 water supply at all times with equal pressure and with drinking water quality that I open the tap and I drink that water. That you would dream in Western countries, but that has happened in a city like Puri and Bhubaneswar. And there, how they have engaged the communities, I think that's very important. Just as an example, then based on our example, that how kind of funds come from at a national level to a state level, but then it again depends on state that how they take it forward. So they kind of take this entire narrative that for us slum is a very important a kind of a typology, and because other households they all have easy access, but it's the slum household that is kind of as you say very They spend a lot on even the basic services, and we, even as a privileged one, we don't spend that much kind of money. So what they have done is that first of all, the biggest challenge was how to lay the system. But I guess it's against the willingness of the functionary, the government functionary, that if something needs to be done, it can be done. If you just need to have that willingness, and they did that. So in a slum wherein access is a problem, they have laid the water pipeline. So they have common storage structures built at specific locations within the slum, and from there you have a dedicated pipeline, and each household has a tap with a meter. So every household gets water 24/7, and that has brought about so much change in their lives. So when we did this assessment, almost women said that they could now save around 1.5 hours of their daily time, because they don't have to go somewhere else to fetch water. They get by just opening the tap. So that's the kind of change that it has brought about. And coming to the point that how communities resilience was built through this entire initiative, and how even the communities played a role. So they have now this structure called Jal Sathis, who are kind of playing the front end role. So every Jal Sathi is assigned 1,000 household, and so this is typically self-help group, dedicated women's self-help group, which they have engaged, and they are responsible for activities like ensuring that every household comes on board and they have a dedicated household level connection. So another important thing what they change at the state here is that usually when it comes to water supply, it's the responsibility of the household to take a connection. So if I want a water connection, I would go to the water utility and say that I need a connection. But in the case of slum household, they have themselves have taken the responsibility. So providing the connectivity to the last mile, to the household level, and even paying for it, WATCO, the Water Corporation of Odisha, they had embedded that cost as a part of their project. So a slum household is not required to pay any money. So this Jal Sathis, what they do is that they bring these households on board. They have been trained to do water testing at tap level. So even if there is any concern regarding water quality, they are trained in doing water quality testing. They do that, and if they see that there is a problem with the water quality, then they have this mobile testing vans and a team which is ready to take action. They do the meter reading, women. They generate the bill there itself, and then they do the collection of the money as such. So these women are from the community itself, so they becomes kind of the voice of the community, and they brings this strong connect. So I think this is one of the a really great initiative, how communities are engaged in community-led water distribution system. So in that way, Odisha also is taking a lot of lead, as Akila ji said, that now a lot of self-help groups are engaged in this desludging services. So earlier you see that it was a kind of very small concentrated pocket of work, but now SHGs taking over doing desludging. You have women SHGs taking the operation and maintenance of the fecal sludge treatment plant. Even the water treatment plant, now transgender SHG in I think Cuttack or Balasore, they are being trained, and they are operating and maintaining a water treatment plant, which was not heard before. So I think it also, my thing is that it all depends on how states and cities take this narrative forward. If the willingness is there, it can be done. And again, I would say that I was trying to look that if there are specifically community-led initiatives wherein they themselves are responsible of running the system, but I guess it's too early. It will take a lot of time, but within this entire kind of chain and a lot of these functions, there I think there's a lot of scope that communities can be embedded, and they can play a very vital role in the sustainability of the project itself. So yeah, that's what I would like to share.
Thank you, Rahul. That's super helpful. Moving on to the track 3, which is basically looking at, I mean, we have heard some of the challenges, opportunities, models, and what are some national and state governments are doing. I mean, if we have to work collectively towards this resilience building, what are some of the short and medium term goals or the theory of change or the outcomes that we keep in mind? Bijal, when I will start from you, because yeah, I mean you can talk about it from your past 2 decades, 3 decades of experience.
So again, I would divide this entire, community resilience building into 3 phases based on our work. One is a household level, their own houses. Second would be settlement level, and the third would be the city level. When you talk of monsoon action plans and heat action plans, which is community taking lead in the city and at the ward level. I think in the very short and medium terms, they get organized, they have their own groups, they get trained, they learn, and they make their own, understand their own. I mean, they already know, but they sort of organize their vulnerabilities and start to make action plans. I think that is the short, and start taking action at the household and their own settlement level. That's very easy. But then for them to come out and build a critical group that starts talking at the ward level or probably at the city level is something which is a little bit long term. I would say beyond 5 years outcome, and between 5 to 10 years. And I think working without a catalyst, we all give example of Odisha, but I would like to say that there is a great political will which pushes the city's officials to do that. Now, most cities, most states probably will not find that political will. And in absence of that kind of a political will is where really, NGOs come then in as a catalyst. And to sustain that over a longer period of time, I think is very, very important when they really become the actors for bringing the change in the cities. So I think, yeah, in the short term, it is at the household level and community level, and then you start building around, wards and cities. I think the main challenge is, as already said, in the urban areas, governance structures are multiple, and how to really navigate them and who does what. Because, it's very easy for the governments to do two things. For example, some of our groups who were much better organized started working on transport issues after 5 to 7 years. And I knew that if they would go to the city would say, बस तो सिर्फ आपके लिए नहीं है ना, तो आप साइन करके सब कुछ लेके आते हो तो दूसरे का भी लाओ. So they actually came to a level where they started talking to the RWAs of the middle class citizens, took their signatures and went with an alternative route to the government. So so you have to be able to talk scientifically and meaningfully, and and go with solutions. I think that's very powerful, and that's where the use of technology also comes in. Map an alternative route, show it, and then they came up saying कि नहीं bus stand के लिए इस route पे जगह कहाँ है. So they also then found the land for the bus stand. It was very street smart, because land allocation is a very technical process, I know. And I asked my staff how did they manage to find that bus stand ka land. What they did was they knew that you have those small tricycles which carry waste at the community level, and after the work is done they are put in places where the government owns land. So they found those two places, and because it had those tricycles which were stacked after work, it was bound to be the municipal corporation's land, and that was given and it really turned out to be the municipal corporation land. So I think that is a big challenge. Another big challenge in issues like water, when you go beyond access, when you go talk of groundwater or resource management, I think one of the big issue like groundwater. So even to us, something which is very abstract and not physically, all of us know that groundwater is going to disappear in India, but we still keep on pumping, right? Because we can't see how much the table is going down every day. So something which is very abstract and physically not seen and is absent, and they are engaged into their day-to-day activities. So the real challenge is that If merely from access, you have to go to a sensitive design, which is much larger, talk of city level things. You have to keep reiterating. You have to demystify the science. And most times, I do find technologists, pardon me, all the technologists, that they really do want to keep the technology in their hands. They don't want to demystify it for the people. So to be able to, sort of build their capacities in a way that the technologies are demystified, and also work for the poor. So I'll give you an example. We were working on water issues, and we went with water purifiers, and I thought in their null there is no 24 hours water, so let's take a water purifier which can sort of from a container pour water into the purifier and come out. So they said a big no, because they thought that electric current wala jo hai usi se acha purify hota hai. So they said, and we had gone with around costing 3,500 rupees. So they say you come with an electric water purifier, and the challenge is we will not be able to change the candle every quarter as required, because the candle, we will invest 3,500 rupees, candle is costing 1,000 rupees. So every quarter 1,000 rupees we are not going to do. Now it is for the technologists, right? They claim to be educated to come up with a water purifier which does not really ask to be changed every quarter or cost. So I think technologists also need to unlearn and come much nearer to the communities. And I think the last thing is that there have to be see really what is happening right now in most of the states and cities is that the communities have to claim spaces. Like you created a community water forum in Mubarakpur where we are working, and the Delhi water forum where they come and speak. What if such spaces are not there? They have to claim it. So we haven't really implemented the 74th Amendment, where what committees have been constituted and the communities got a voice. So I think these, we have to see that they have to, the claim has to be stopped. They have to be invited in such spaces by cities, and that requires a lot of moving around. It requires a lot of patient capital and an approach which will take them from thinking at merely access level to a much larger city level. That's, I think, very critical.
Swati, I mean, while we have talked about resilience building from a WASH standpoint and access to basic services, a lot of time we don't talk about the healthy condition of living or the livability condition and all those things. I know you have worked with a lot of community where sort of the livability aspects got focused. Just wanted to hear from you that how that sort of aspects can be brought into the larger disadvantaged community resilience building, and what's your thought around that, some of the challenges, opportunities.
I'll just quickly introduce Social Design Collaborative. We are an interdisciplinary design team. We are made up of architects, sociologists, and social workers. Some of my team is here. And we work with communities living in informal settlements, building I think very similar to the project that you're doing. So trying to strengthen the community infrastructure with them. So community spaces, community centers, schools, daycare centers, health centers, and such. And we work in slums which are not even on the list. So apart from the 675 slums which are non-notified in Delhi, there are so many others which are not even on the list. So they are in a lot of precarity, and that's the context that we work in. So to respond to your question, I just quickly wanted to talk about a project that we are working on, which is about building Anganwadis, which falls under the ICDS scheme, the Integrated Child Development Services scheme by the Women and Child Welfare Department. And what we are trying to, and we have also tested this in the past, we have tried it, that if you are able to build a space in a slum, then the Women and Child Welfare Department does provide the service of the Anganwadi, as long as there are more than 800 households, more than 40 children. In rural areas, these Anganwadis, which are public daycare centers, are built by the government, but in urban centers, they are mostly run out of rented spaces because space is so limited. But if we can also help create such a space, which is well designed, well lit, with a lot of light, good quality of space, then can we also improve the quality of service is what we are trying to do. But there are also long-term impacts which we are trying to work on, and they take time, of course. So of course the short-term impact is there is a space for nutrition, for health and early child education, and also not just nutrition for children but also mothers, pregnant lactating mothers and adolescent girls. But apart from that, the other sort of impacts that we're looking at is also how to strengthen the built environment, how to help people build in a stronger, more durable sort of way. So the Anganwadis we're building right now, they're all separate pilots, built for separate contexts. So for example, if one of them is in a community where lots of waste pickers are living, they are very prone to fires. So can we help build in such a way that the materials used are not so inflammable? Like the most affordable materials like plastic and bamboo are highly inflammable, but can we within the same cost, because people have found the best way to build within the budget, but how can we support in within the same budget or close, trying to build with different materials, alternative sort of building techniques, which of course takes time and it's about scale. So if you're doing 10 pilots, that may not be enough. It requires a lot more time, maybe 10-15 years before we can have the sort of impact we're talking about. And also another larger impact that we are trying to work on is how to also help in like people are constantly trying to assert the right to be there, right? The right to the city, as we call it academically. And building an Anganwadi also helps provide a address to the neighborhood, right? Because it's a legitimate sort of a service given by the government, which becomes this sort of a co-produced space by the community and the people, right? Because they have built the space and the department has set up the service there. So sort of the natural owners are both the government and the people. And the moment you have an Anganwadi, you can have a medical camp, you can have a ID camp, and other services can start then coming in. So there is an incremental access to services, which is a process that we're trying to get into. And I think mostly what I want to talk about, I don't know if I have really solutions, because I think I have to wait for my hair to become much more white. I think whiter than it is. But I can tell you what we have done wrong. I can tell you the gaps in our work, which we have identified based on the past few years of work. And one major thing I've realized as an architect is that the finish line is always further than we imagine. So what happens is we are trained as designers to come up with a product or come up with a design, and once that is done in a true sort of college submission style, we are like ho gaya kaam ho gaya. So the moment we have built a space or we have sort of created some design which we have then implemented on ground, we spend a lot of effort on it. It takes months, sometimes over a year, 2 years, and then you feel that there's an inauguration, and then of course you go back and take feedback, but the work there is not really done. It's 60% of the work. The 40% of the work, I've realized, is dissemination of what you have done, meaning to say, at the end of the day, of course, it's not enough to do these few projects. What we're really hoping is that it can scale up, that it becomes a sort of practice to be adopted. And actually, we had focused our time and efforts and resources on making sure that what was done is talked about, it is replicated, it is it takes a form which can be easily adopted. That is actually the more important part of the work. So if there is any suggestion I can give is, absolutely what you're doing right now, this sort of a discussion, but also how is it recorded? Is it a toolkit, toolbox? These are all of our favorite, words, but also for a reason. The second sort of gap that I have realized in our work is, so we always do work with an interim community organization because we come from the outside, and of course people do not know us. We worked in several communities for many years, they know us, but many times we work in newer areas. So we work with community organizations such as MHT, such as Seva, and many other local ones like Basti Suraksha Manch. And they are the ones who have been working in these communities for many years. But also what I've realized is that many times we feel, okay, they are the sort of link between us and the community. but actually requires much more, which is the community itself taking that ownership, which is not just on the NGO. So as a very small example, we had built a daycare center. This was a few years back, and we had also people said they also wanted a community space, not just an Anganwadi, but also community space where they could play Karo in the evening hours. And so when we went there after a year, after we had built the space, we saw that it was, I mean, they told us they can't use the space because it's always locked up in the evening. And so we asked them, why is that happening? And they said, because, I mean, the NGO, the interim NGO, feels like there'll be security issues and there'll be vandalism and that sort of a thing. And so at some level, we failed to create the sort of a dialogue where that handover or that transition could have happened. So now what we're working on is, apart from the interim sort of NGO we're working with, we're also, the ownership is really on a community-based organization from within. So in some cases, there is one community where we're working with construction workers. So they have a construction workers club, which is already there. So we are going to, I mean, so they are the ones who will sort of take over the ownership. In one case, it is a all India minority group, which they've already formed. In one case, it's a group of women. Or if there isn't an organization, perhaps an RWA can be formed. So these are the sort of approaches that we are working on. Do you have time for some more?
No, probably. We have to stop
Okay,
here.
so maybe in the next round, if there is.
Sure. Thank you, Swati. Over to you, Ritu. Very quickly, I mean, the question remains the same, but your experience working with the multiple communities, and you have earlier worked with a big organization. So, yeah, I mean.
Thank you so much, first of all, Samrat, for giving me the opportunity to be here. Today, I'd like to share my experience of working with communities, like you just said, over the past many years. So before I co-founded Core Urban Foundation, I was working with another NGO where I was working on issues of water and sanitation in slums in Delhi. And we worked in those communities for about 8 years, and the project has ended now. It's been about more than a year now. Recently, I had the chance to go back to those community groups and talk to them about what the experience had been of engaging with an NGO. What interesting thing that I found was 9 out of the 10 community groups were actually felt empowered. Like words that I heard were I feel more confident, we are able to talk to authorities now. Something like NGO changed our lives, and we're really happy that we were able to engage. So I mean, listening to all that makes me realize that the project was a success because infrastructure came in, there was a kind of resilience built, people were empowered. However, when I asked them if they were able to meet as a group after the NGO had exited, only about 2 groups managed, 2 to 3 groups managed to meet at least once in the time that after the NGO had exited. So I reflected like why that happened, and from my experience, I would like to share 3 challenges that we feel during the community engagement process. Now, I think all of us have talked about all the high-level things. I'm going to talk about very particular project-oriented challenges. Firstly, I think that the group members are not equally empowered. So we have this model of working with champions, group leaders, and champions when we engage with communities. But I think this only works if the leader is empathetic. She is respected in the community and is also selected by the community members themselves. I'll give you an example. So when I went to a community in Andrewsganj, the one of the lane is in the summers having issues with access to untimely water supply. 2 baje pani aata hai raat ko, and then the poor quality of water. And then when they approach the leader who lives in another lane and she does not have the same issue, she was not interested in helping out the own community member. So I think it would be great to sort of empower all the members, not just focus on the leaders, which we generally tend to do. Second point I like to mention here is the group formation process itself. So how do we actually form these community groups that we all talk about so much? Sometimes the groups are formed because they have the same issue. किसी गली में पानी का issue है, toilet का है, or they form because people come from the same region. कि यहाँ पूरी like in Tea Market in Srinivasapuri, the slum, entire lane. It was very easy to work with the group because they all came from Bengal. Or it could be because we have existing leaders or pradhans, so we work with them. Another way to form groups is also how the NGO field team engages with people on the ground. We also have restrictions. We have a time. We have when we can go on the site and days. So there are many ways to form a group, but the important point here is that whether the group is actually representing the entire settlement. Is the information that we're discussing during the meeting, is it reaching everyone in the lane, everyone that it needs to reach to? I'll give you another example here. In one of these slums called Karpuri Thakur, which is on the ring road in Kalkaji constituency. So when we initially started working there, we worked with the Pradhan. There was an issue of access to water supply. वहाँ पानी नहीं था since decades. When we started working, very soon we realized that the Pradhan himself is selling water, potent water to the community at a higher cost. So, then we had to sort of bypass him somehow, form another community group with the women who are living at the rear end of the community or the settlement. And then after many years of struggle, we did manage to get pipeline laid into the settlement. That was a great success, I feel. I think we need to, there's a need to focus on the group formation process itself, and also need to acknowledge and recognize the power dynamics that go in the settlements. The third point is again a very project oriented point, where we have a lot of emphasis on quantity then over quality and the processes. So for example, when I was working, we would always be asked to give numbers, kitne toilet ban gaye, kitna pani ka point aa gaya, number of beneficiaries reached, direct and indirect. So we would all scramble to get our numbers correct. But could we also think of capturing the processes that go behind reaching the output? Kitne letters likhe gaye hain, how many people actually know how to write letters, how many people actually know which authority to approach and when, and where is the building located. So I think this knowledge transfer needs to happen throughout the project period instead of just waiting for the closeout period to come ki end mein karenge. So it should happen throughout. That this is, I think, a very important thing that we can accommodate into our projects. Apart from this, I'd like to just very quickly touch upon 3 short and medium term outcomes for a project. One is, like we already discussed during the presentation, is having quick win for trust building. Trust is very important for any group to sustain. We need to have groups come together to work on certain things so that they can work towards a tangible outcome and build trust in the process. So having those very quick wins could be as simple as unlocking MLA funds for getting a bench installed or getting a dustbin. So that is one. Second, I like to mention that we need to work beyond project deliverables to connect with the community. Now, even though the project I worked on was water and sanitation, I got a lot of demand from the community that we want to get saving groups made, humko paise bachane hai, how to do it, teach us, tell us. So even though it was not in our mandate, we did end up making 7 SHG groups out of the 10 settlements that I visited recently. And I was very happy to see that all 7 are functional and actually doing pretty well. They survived COVID. They were able to give loans to the group members and even members outside. I think that also adds to the financial resilience. Rahulji has already talked about SHG. Madhavanji also mentioned it. So I think that is very important. The third and last one I'd like to say is the upscaling of community members and NGO field team. When we talk about NGO and NGO engagement, we always think about the senior leadership and like the work we do, but we never focus our attention to the field staff, the field team who are actually on ground working with the people. So I think, like, do you really think that our field team, our leaders, could we do something that we could enhance their skill set? Maybe they could have trainings for financial literacy, or for them knowing what policies are, how to apply for them, something like conflict resolution, negotiations. If they are empowered, I think it'll be very easy for them to transfer that skill set and knowledge to the community members over the project period, and not just like do formal trainings. I think that's it from me. Thank you so much.
Whereas the CAG, which had to interact with the government, were facing issues. And that's what I'm trying to tell you. It's very, very difficult. And for them to sustain without us, minimum, that's what takes 10 years, minimum to a certain level, because multiple stakeholders, they're all democratic institutions which need finance. Management में सबको interest है और वो easily हो जाता है.
Thank you, everyone. I mean, I don't think we have today the opportunity to sort of having a round of question from. It's great to hear all the thought here, but thank you once again. I think it's a conversation we should continue. I mean, of course, there is no clear-cut solution or action steps coming out of the discussion, but a lot of interesting thoughts that are sort of coming, and probably we need to still figure out how entire thing can be automated. I mean, you have mentioned, ma'am, but yeah, some of the things probably we still need a lot of discussion and deliberations. But thank you everyone. Thanks for having this coming over here and having this discussion. Thank you.